Hi everyone, welcome to Nithrania Game Club. My name is Branislav Berec and you're watching Game in a Nutshell, a series of videos where we teach how to play various board games. Today we will learn how to play Coimbra game from Eggertspiele. First, shuffle the monastery tokens and then deal them randomly on the corresponding spaces on the map. Return the unused tokens back into the box. These are influence scoring tiles, and this side is used for a 4-player game and the other side is used for a 3 and a 2-player game. Shuffle them and deal them randomly to the influence tracks. These die tokens are not used in a 4-player game, but in a 3-player game deal them like this, and in a 2-player game deal all 5 tokens like this. Because we're setting up a 3-player game, we will use this setup. This is a deck of Voyage cards. Shuffle them and deal 6 of them randomly. The game comes with 13 dice, and in a 4-player game all of them are used. In a 3-player game, remove 1 purple and 1 green die from the game, and in a 2-player game, remove another green and purple die, and also 1 gray and 1 orange die. In our 3-player game, this is the set of dice that we will use. Each player will get 1 player board, 3 die holders, 2 markers that he will put on the number 7 on the coins track and also number 7 on the guards track, 1 pilgrim, and 25 discs of his color. Each player will place 1 of his discs on the starting point on the influence tracks, and 1 disc on the starting point of the victory points track. Then randomly determine the starting player order and then prepare the character cards. Shuffle each deck separately and then place deck number 2 on deck number 3. Keep the deck number 1 separate for the moment, and this deck is called the character stack. Place 4 favor tiles next to the castle, which is this part of the board. Then place this cap tile above the favor tile with the 2 crowns, and then start drawing cards from the character stack and place 4 cards next to the upper city, then 4 cards next to the central city, and then 4 cards next to the lower city. Then distribute these 4 crown tokens to the cards using this procedure. Take the token, let's say the purple one, and look at the rightmost column and go from top to bottom. Put the token on the first card of the same color that you will find. In this case, the purple token will go to this card. The gray token would go to this card. The yellow token cannot be placed to the rightmost column because there is no yellow card there. In that case, go to the next column and try to find a card of that color in this column. If there is no such card, go to the next column and then the next one until you find the card of that appropriate color. Then place the yellow token onto that card. In a very rare situation, if there would be no card of that color, just don't place the token of that color at all. And finally, the green token goes to this card. Now shuffle the first deck and randomly create as many pairs of cards as there are players. You can put the remaining cards back into the box. Now in the reverse order, so starting from the yellow player in this case. Each player has 2 options. Either taking 1 pair of cards or placing a pilgrim on one of these 4 corners of the starting location on the map. Then in the player order, so now starting with the blue player, each player must do the other action. So if the blue player placed his pilgrim in the first round, in the second round he has to pick one of these cards. Red player picked the cards in the first round, so in the second round he has to place the pilgrim. Each card has a color which determines its class, then the number, and then the type of the effect. When you take the card, look at the color and this number and then move your marker that many numbers on the corresponding influence track. So for this card, Yellow player will place his marker on the first spot. Then each card has a certain effect. If the card has any immediate effect, put it on the right side of the player board as indicated by the symbol over here, and then carry out the effect, which in this case grants 4 additional guards. If the card is effective during the C phase of the game, place it under the player board as indicated by this C symbol. You will place more cards in this area, which affects the E phase of the game, and in this area you will place cards that have some game end bonuses. Speaking of bonuses, because there's so many of them, I will not explain them in this video, but you can find the description of all those bonuses in the rulebook. The game of Coimbra is played over 4 rounds, and each round has 6 phases. In the first phase, or phase A, first player rolls the dice. In phase B, players will draft the dice and then place them into these 4 city locations. In the phase C, players will retrieve their dice and take these tiles and cards. In phase D, the new player order will be determined. In the phase E, players will receive income based on their position on these 4 influence tracks. And in the phase F, players will invest into these voyages. At the end of 4th round, final scoring will take place and the player with the most points is the winner. In the phase A, first player or any other player simply rolls the dice. In phase B, players take turns in the player order. On your turn, you simply choose a die, put it into your holder, and then place it into one of these 4 locations. As indicated by these symbols, in the castle, dice values have to be placed in the ascending order, and in the upper city, center city, and also the lower city, dice have to be placed in the descending order. These die tokens act as a regular dice, so when you place dice into this location, treat this token as any other dice. So let's say the next player would choose this purple 2, and if they would decide to put it into the castle, the die of value 2 has to go behind the die with the value 1. Then, if the yellow player would decide to take this 2 gray die, he would place it next into the order, although the value is the same as the previous die, but his die simply came after this one. If the blue player would decide to take this white die of a value 1 and also place it into the castle, he would place it into this position because number 1 is before number 2's, but it still goes behind any other number 1's in the castle. If the red player would decide to take this orange 5 and place it into the upper city, now remember, this has to go in the descending order, so the number 5 would be at the beginning of this upper city. However, if let's say the yellow player would decide to take this green 4 die and he would decide to put it into the central city, because it's a 4 value die and there is already 4 value die token, this has to go behind that token. As you can see, one player can have multiple dice in one location and there is no limit to the number of dice in any location. Players can place dice into any location they want, and once all players have placed 3 dice, the phase B, the drafting phase, is over. In phase C, players will retrieve their dice from city locations and grab some of these favor tiles or cards. This phase is not played in the player order, but the order is given by the locations. So first the castle and then upper city, center city and a lower city. And in each city location, the player order is determined by the die holder color. So in this case, First is the blue's player turn, again the blue player, then the red player, and then the yellow player. When resolving the castle location, the player taking the turn takes his die and places it back onto the player board, still keeping the die in a die holder, and then picks one of these favor tiles. This action is free, so there is no cost associated with it, and each tile provides specific bonuses which you can find in the rulebook. In addition, each tile provides certain number of crowns, which is important for determining the player order for the next round. So when you select a tile, place it in front of you and take the immediate bonus, and keep in mind the bonuses that will be applied in the next phases. Then it's the next player's turn, which in this case, again, it's a blue player. Take the die, put it back onto your player board, and again take one of those tiles. If you take the tile with the 2 crowns and with this cap tile, keep the token in front of you and take the bonuses as already described, and place the cap of one of your dice in the upper city, center city, or a lower city. The blue player only has a die in a lower city, so he would place the cap onto this 3 die. The cap tile increases the value of a die by 3, so this purple 3 die is now a purple 6. Now you have to reposition this die, so because it's number 6, treat it as if it was just placed over here, so with the value of 6 it would go to the top of the queue. If the original value of the die would be 2, with this cap the increased value would be 5, so in this case it would go to the second place. When resolving the upper city, central city, or a lower city, when it is the player's turn, he has to choose one of the cards from that location. Let's say the red player would choose this card. First, he needs to pay the price. Each card has a symbol in the top left corner. This symbol indicates whether the price has to be paid in coins or in guards. The price is then determined by the value of a die. So if red player would choose this card, he has to pay 5 coins, which he would subtract on his player board. Then he would take the card and also a die, place the die back into his player board, and he would resolve the card. First of all, it is gray card and with the value of 2. And so he would increase the position of his marker by 2 spaces. Then he would resolve the effect, and in this case it's the immediate effect, which says gain 4 guards, which he would mark on his player board. The cards with the immediate effect go to the right of the player board. Don't forget to check for the Phase C bonuses, which might be applied at this moment. If a player would choose a card with the crown token on that card, he would take the card, apply all the effects as usual, and then keep the crown token next to the player board until the end of the round. If the neutral die token would be triggered, because it would be sort of its turn now, simply remove the card with the highest influence value. If there are 2 or more cards with the same highest value, remove the leftmost one. Then flip the token face down and it's the next player's turn. If you don't want to, or you cannot buy a card, you can take the distress action, which means you can take up to 2 coins and up to 2 guards. When all players have retrieved their dice from the city locations, flip all the tokens face up and discard all the remaining cards. In Phase D, the new player order will be determined. Each player will count the number of crowns he has. That includes these crown tokens, crown symbols on favor tiles, and also crown symbols next to his current position on the initiative track. The player with the highest number would go first, and if players would be tied, switch their position. In Phase E, players will collect income from their dice. This time the value of a die is not important, but the color is. For each die, repeat this procedure. Take the die, remove it from the die holder, and collect the reward from this influence track. It's the orange influence track, and the position of the red disc determines the reward, which in this case is 1 coin. That will be marked on the player board. Then take the second die, which again is the orange die, so the red player will receive that reward again, marking it on its player board. Finally, he would remove the purple die from the holder and take the reward from the purple track, which is moving the pilgrim 1 spot, which we would describe in a moment. If a red player would resolve the green die, the position of his discs would determine that he would get 4 victory points as a reward. Again, don't forget to apply the Phase E bonuses from the cards that you have in the Phase E bonus zone. In the Phase F, players will have a chance to invest into these voyages. This phase is played in the new player order, and each player may invest in 1 voyage. First, the player needs to pay the price, so in this case it would be 8 guards or 7 coins, and then he would place a disc on that voyage. Voyages are basically objective cards and can yield victory points at the end of the game. Each player can only invest once in 1 voyage, so the next investment has to go to some other voyage card. However, more players can have their discs on 1 voyage card. At the end of the round, put all the favor tokens back next to the castle. Take the character stack and deal 4 cards next to each city location. And place the crown tokens on the cards as described in the procedure at the beginning of the game. When you receive a bonus which allows you to move your pilgrim, you may move your pilgrim along the map. When you first move your pilgrim, you have to follow this one-way road, and then you can either come to this place or this place. Let's say we end up here. From this spot, you can start moving one way, then go backwards. You can even forfeit some of the movement points, it's up to you. However, you may never go back this one-way road. Each pilgrim starts his own way into a different section of the map, but then later on there may be multiple pilgrims in one spot. If you would move into a monastery, place one of your discs there if it's not already there, and if it has any immediate effect, you can either take that effect now or forfeit it. If you would get into a monastery with the permanent effect, again, place your disc there, and now you can start using that permanent effect. You can even come back to the same monastery which you have already visited, but even if there's an immediate effect, if you have already visited that monastery, you cannot use that immediate effect. And finally, when you get into a monastery and use the effect of the monastery, if you still have any movement points available, you can continue moving. At the end of the 4th round, the game is finished and the final scoring will take place. First, count the victory points from voyages. Then score all 4 influence tracks. We have a 3-player here, but if it was a 4-player game, first 3 players on each track would score these victory points. However, in a 3-player game, only first 2 players would score points. So, on the green track, red player would score 11 points and the blue player would score 5 points. All other influence tracks would be scored in the same way, and in a case where there are 2 players on the same spot, the player with the marker on the bottom, which means the player who got there first, wins the tie. If it was a 2-player game, the player in the 2nd place will only be awarded the victory points if the difference between the 1st and the 2nd player is not more than 3 places. So in a situation like this, red player would be awarded 11 points, but the blue player would be not awarded those 5 points because he's more than 3 spots away. One last note, the discs on the 0 spaces of influence tracks yield 0 victory points. Then score the victory points from the sets of diplomas. Some cards have these symbols of diplomas and there are 5 different colors. In addition, there is this wild diploma symbol. Now, using this table in a rulebook, for each set of 5 different diplomas, a player will receive 12 points. For a set of 4 different diplomas, a player will score 8 points. Obviously, one card or one symbol can be part of one set only. Then score the victory points from the cards which provide victory points at the end of the game. And finally, do a little math, count up all the remaining coins, guards, and the crown symbols, including the crown symbols on the current position on the initiative track at the end of the game. Then divide this summary by 2 and round it down. Then player with the most points is the winner. And that's it, that's how you play Coimbra. If you have any questions or comments, please put them into the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. If you like the show, please subscribe. My name is Branislav Berec. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. See you next time.